Scream is an American horror slasher franchise that includes 5 films, a television series, merchandise, and games. The series has grossed over $740 million in worldwide box office receipts. The film series is created by Kevin Williamson, who wrote the first 2 films and the 4th. The first 4 films were directed by Wes Craven. Aaron Kruger wrote the 3rd film. Recent entries have been directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette, with Guy Busick and James Vanderbilt as writers and Williamson returning as executive producer. Bob and Harvey Weinstein served as executive producer in the first 4 films, while Gary Barber served as executive producer in the 5th film. Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and Roger L. Jackson, who voices the various Ghostface killers, have all starred in the first 5 films, with Cox and Jackson reprising their roles for the 6th film. Melissa Barrera, Jenna Ortega, Mason Gooding, and Jasmine Savoy Brown joined the franchise in the 5th film and are all due back for the 6th. The supporting cast of the franchise usually changes with each installment, with a few exceptions. Jamie Kennedy and Liev Schreiber appear in each of the first 3 films, while Skeet Ulrich appears in the 1st and 5th installments, Marley Shelton in the 4th and 5th, and Hayden Panettiere in the 4th and 6th. Additionally, Heather Matarazzo makes cameo appearances in the 3rd and 5th films, as does Nancy O'Dell in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Having appeared in the opening scene of the first film and on its poster, Drew Barrymore is strongly associated with the franchise, which has also drawn many notable actors making single film appearances as supporting cast or cameos, including Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Henry Winkler, Jada Pinkett, Omar Epps, Dwayne Martin, Timothy Olyphant, Laurie Metcalf, Jerry O'Connell, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Heather Graham, Tori Spelling, Luke Wilson, Portia de Rossi, Rebecca Gayheart, Patrick Dempsey, Parker Posey, Scott Foley, Jenny McCarthy, Kelly Rutherford, Dion Richmond, Carrie Fisher, Emma Roberts, Adam Brody, Rory Culkin, Eric Knudsen, Mary McDonnell, Kristen Bell, Anna Paquin, Dylan Minnette, and many more. The films follow Sidney Prescott and her struggle against a succession of murderers who adopt the guise of Ghostface to stalk and kill their victims. Sidney receives support from town policeman Dewey Riley, tabloid reporter Gail Weathers, and film geek Randy Meeks, along with various other friends, romantic partners, and acquaintances that change as the series progresses. The first film, Scream, was released on December 20, 1996, and became the highest-grossing slasher film in the world until the release of Halloween. The second entry, Scream 2, was released on December 12, 1997, which was less than a year after the first film. The third installment, Scream 3, was released on February 4, 2000, and was originally the concluding chapter of the series. 11 years later, the franchise was revived with a 4th installment, Scream 4, which was released on April 15, 2011. An anthology television series, Scream, which followed new characters and settings, aired for 3 seasons from 2015 to 2016 on MTV and on VH1 in 2019. A 5th installment in the film series was released on January 14, 2022. It entered development in 2019 with filmmakers Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillette signed on to direct, Busick and Vanderbilt writing the screenplay, and original creator Williamson returning as an executive producer, marking the first installment in the film series to not be directed by Wes Craven, who died in 2015. In February 2022, it was confirmed that a 6th installment of the series was in development, scheduled for release on March 10, 2023. Williamson's original script for the first film was bought by Miramax and developed under the Dimension Films label by Bob and Harvey Weinstein, who recruited Craven to direct. Craven in turn recruited composer Marco Beltrami to score the film. This team went on to be involved in every film of the series, though Williamson was forced to take a smaller role in Scream 3 due to his commitment to other projects, with Aaron Kruger replacing him as screenwriter. Kruger also provided uncredited rewrites for Scream 4. Craven ran into conflicts with the Motion Picture Association of America over the series and was forced to reduce the violence in Scream 3 due to the Columbine High School massacre, resulting in increased focus on violence in the media. Scream became notable for its use of established and recognizable actors, which was uncommon for slasher films at the time. Scream, Scream 2, and Scream received high praise from critics, while Scream 3 received a more mixed response. Scream 4, Craven's final film, was generally seen as a return to form for the series, and has undergone a positive reappraisal in the years since. The first film has been credited with revitalizing the horror genre in the late 1990s by combining a traditional slasher film with humor, characters aware of horror film clichés, and a clever plot. It was one of the highest-grossing films of 1996 and became the highest-grossing slasher film in the world, an honor it held until it was surpassed by 2018's Halloween. Its success was matched by Scream 2, which not only broke box office records of the time but was also considered superior to the original by some critics. Scream 3 fared worse than its predecessors, both critically and financially, with many critics commenting that it had become the type of horror film it originally parodied in Scream and Scream 2, while others praised it for successfully completing the film trilogy. Scream 4 also received mixed reviews, with criticism mainly aimed at its use of horror film clichés, although many considered it an improvement over its predecessor. The film series has been the recipient of several awards, including a Saturn Award for Best Actress and MTV Movie Award for Best Female Performance for Campbell and a Saturn Award for Best Horror Film for Scream. Plot: on the 15th anniversary week of the original Woodsboro murders, high school students Jenny Randall and Marnie Cooper are murdered by Ghostface. Sidney Prescott returns to Woodsboro the next day to promote her book with her publicist, Rebecca Walters. After evidence is found in her rental car, Sidney becomes a suspect in the murders and must stay in town until they are solved. Sidney's cousin, Jill Roberts, who is coping with the infidelity of her ex-boyfriend, Trevor Sheldon, gets a threatening phone call from Ghostface, as does her friend Olivia Morris. Jill and Olivia, alongside their friend Kirby Reed, are questioned about their calls by Dewey Riley, now the town's sheriff, while his deputies Judy Hicks, Anthony Perkins, and Haas assist him in the case. Gail Weathers, Dewey's wife, is struggling with writer's block and decides to investigate the murders against her husband's wishes. Sidney stays over with Jill and her mother, Sidney's Aunt Kate. That night, Olivia is killed by Ghostface as Jill and Kirby watch in horror from across the street. Sidney herself is then confronted by Ghostface, and they fight until Ghostface is forced to flee when Perkins and Haas arrive. At the hospital, Sidney fires Rebecca after learning of her desire to exploit the murders to increase book sales, and Rebecca is subsequently murdered by Ghostface at a parking garage. Gail enlists the help of two high school movie fanatics, Charlie Walker and Robbie Mercer. Charlie theorizes that the killer is following the rules of horror remakes, and Gail and Sidney conclude that the killer will likely strike at the Stab-a-thon, a screening party held in a barn where teenagers gather to watch all movies in the Stab franchise. Gail sneaks into the party to investigate, but Ghostface attacks her, stabbing her in the shoulder. Haas and Perkins, who were assigned to guard Jill's house, are also murdered. Sidney discovers from another taunting call from Ghostface that Jill has left for Kirby's, before Ghostface attacks them and kills Kate. Jill, Kirby, Charlie, Robbie, and Trevor are at an after-party at Kirby's house when Ghostface strikes, killing a drunken Robbie. Sidney arrives to leave with Jill, but they are both chased by Ghostface. As Sidney calls Dewey and tries to find Jill, Kirby frees Charlie, who was bound and gagged, but he immediately stabs her, revealing himself as Ghostface, before leaving her to bleed out. Sydney is confronted by Charlie and stabbed by a second Ghostface, who reveals herself as Jill. She admits to masterminding the murders out of jealousy from the fame that Sydney received for surviving the original murders, and desires to achieve fame as a survivor of the murders and framing Trevor as Ghostface. Jill kills Trevor and betrays Charlie, stabbing him to death to pin him as Trevor's accomplice so she can be the sole survivor. She then stabs Sydney and mutilates herself to frame Trevor further. Dewey and the police arrive as Sydney and Jill are taken to the hospital. After discovering that Sydney has survived, an enraged Jill goes to her hospital room and makes a final attempt to kill her. Dewey, Gale, and Judy intervene, having been clued in by the fact that Jill somehow knew exactly where Gale was stabbed. Jill subdues Dewey and Hicks and holds Gale at gunpoint, but Sydney incapacitates her with a defibrillator while denouncing her motive, and ultimately kills Jill by shooting her in the heart. Dewey calls in all police units, as reporters outside erroneously name Jill as the sole surviving hero. Cast, Production, Development. Scream 4 was announced by the Weinstein Company in July 2008, with Wes Craven saying that he would not mind directing the film if the script was as good as Scream. Kevin Williamson, the writer of Scream and Scream 2, confirmed his return in January 2010, stating that the fourth film's production would begin during the hiatus of his show The Vampire Diaries and that Craven would direct the film. In March 2010, it was confirmed that Craven would indeed direct. In May 2010, Kathy Conrad, who produced the first 3 films in the series, filed a $3 million lawsuit against the Weinstein Company, alleging that they violated a written agreement that entitled her company, Cat Entertainment, first rights to produce all films in the series. The Weinsteins argued that this contract required Conrad's services be exclusive to the franchise, which Conrad calls false pretext, claiming the previous film did not require this condition. The suit accuses the Weinsteins of surreptitious behavior and a scheme to force plaintiffs to walk away from the Scream franchise without compensation, enabling them to cut costs by hiring someone else to produce. In April 2011, it was reported that the Weinsteins had settled out of court with Conrad, the details remaining confidential, though it was claimed that she would receive a cash payment plus a percentage of the profits from Scream 4. Writing. Craven stated that there had been no real-life Ghostface murders from between the decade time jump of Scream 3 to Scream 4, but that there had been numerous sequels to the film within a film stab. He also commented on the status of Sidney Prescott. She's done her best to move on from the events that occurred in the previous films, even releasing a successful book. Craven said that endless sequels, the modern spew of remakes, film studios and directors are the butts of parodies in the film. The main characters have to figure out where the horror genre is in current days to figure out the modern events happening to and around them. Williamson expressed his desire to tell a story in which the audience would really care about the characters, like with Sidney Prescott, who survived the first 3 films, and focus on them rather than the next kill, in comparison to other horror films like those of the Saw franchise. In an early draft of the script, Gale and Dewey had a baby, but this was changed after it was decided bringing a baby into the film would make shooting impossible. In another early form of the script, the opening scene had Sydney start fighting with Ghostface and be left for dead. There would have been a 2-year gap in the story while she recovered. However, Bob Weinstein feared it would slow the pace of the story and bringing in young characters would work out best. There were numerous other differences between the original script and the version that eventually reached the screen. For instance, the opening sequences were changed around, as can be seen in the alternative versions and deleted scenes on the DVD. Also, the stab-a-thon and the sequences involving Gale being attacked there did not appear in the original script. Another major difference was the ending. The hospital finale scenes were added on later in the writing process. The original script ended at the house, with Jill being loaded into the ambulance and speaking to Dewey, then agreeing to give the photographers one photo under the pretense that they would then leave her alone. Just then, a paramedic from inside the house shouts that they have a woman alive, not specified but assumed to be either Sydney or Kirby. The film would have ended on this cliffhanger, presumably setting Jill up as an antagonist/anti-heroine in the next film. There were rumors that Sydney would then possibly be suffering from amnesia in the next film, unable to recall that Jill was the killer. There were also rumors that Williamson was upset that this ending was changed. Scream 3 writer Aaron Kruger was brought in during production to do rewrites. Craven said, "Look, there was a bumpy period when things shifted over from Kevin to Aaron. I signed up to do a script by Kevin and unfortunately that didn't go all the way through the shooting. But it certainly is Kevin's script and concept and characters and themes." Additional rewrites were made by Paul Harris Boardman. It was reported that the actors were not given the 140-page script past page 75 in order to protect the identity of the Ghostface killer. Casting. In September 2009, Variety reported that Neve Campbell, David Arquette, and Courtney Cox would return. Craven briefly explained their roles in a later interview with Entertainment Weekly, saying it's a total integration of those three and new kids. The story of Sid, Gale, and Dewey is very much a part of the movie. At a press conference for Repo Men, Liev Schreiber, who played Cotton Weary in the first three films, stated there were no plans for his reprisal. In an interview with FE-Airnet, Williamson continued to deny a rumor of Jamie Kennedy returning. "I would love nothing more than to have Jamie Kennedy in the film. However, to have Randy in the film, it sort of just takes it. I mean, Scream 2 was a lie, you know? It's a false move. So I just won't do it. I can't do that. I just won't do it." In April, over 12 casting sites were released to the public to buy for auditions of the film. In May 2010, Hayden Panettiere and Rory Culkin signed on. Ashley Greene was offered the role of Sydney's cousin, Jill, but the role later went to Emma Roberts. Lake Bell was to play Deputy Judy Hicks, but dropped out 4 days before filming due to scheduling conflicts, causing the role to ultimately go to Marley Shelton. Nancy O'Dell reprises her role from the second and third films as a reporter. Roger L. Jackson returned as the voice of Ghostface. Lauren Graham was to play Kate Roberts, the mother of Roberts' character, but dropped out a few days into principal photography. Craven, like in the previous three films, has a cameo and took to his Twitter to ask fans to pick his role. The Hollywood Reporter reported that Anna Paquin and Kristen Bell have cameos in the beginning of the film, akin to Drew Barrymore and Jada Pinkett Smith in the first and second films. Shani Grimes and Lucy Hale also have cameos in the film. In September 2010, Amy Teagarden and Britt Robertson were cast as the film's actual opening roles, Jenny Randall and Marnie Cooper. Filming. On a budget of $40 million, principal photography began on June 28, 2010. Filming was scheduled to end on September 6, after a 42-day shoot, but instead concluded on September 24. Filming took place in and around Ann Arbor, Michigan. Scenes portraying Woodsboro High School featured in the original Scream film were shot at Woodworth Middle School in Dearborn, Michigan. The former 16th District Court in Livonia, Michigan was used as a police station. In April 2010, while scouting for a bookstore to use in the film, Craven spotted a new bookstore that had not yet opened in downtown Northville, Michigan, named Next Chapter Bookstore Bistro. Craven instantly loved the building as well as the name and decided to use both in the film. He also hired the owner's chef to prepare the food and pastry for a scene in the film. The scenes were shot the first week of July. After the test screening in January, Craven and Weinstein did not think two scenes played well for the audience. Amy Teagarden and Alison Brie returned to Detroit in late January and early February 2011 for 4 days of additional shooting. The scenes involved Teagarden's character, who is stalked at her home, and Brie's character, who is attacked in a parking garage. The film also extensively used computer-generated imagery for the first time in the franchise. For example, instead of using a collapsing knife, the knife's blade was added during post-production with CGI effects. Anderson's death scene, in which he is stabbed in the forehead and walks a few feet while talking before finally falling to his death, was not in the script but was inspired by a real-life medical emergency Craven had seen in a documentary about a person being stabbed through their head and walked into an emergency room. He thought it was extraordinary if somebody was stabbed in the head and still be alive for a while. Craven also did not tell the studio that he was taking this approach for the death scene, jokingly saying he hoped he would not be fired the next day. Music. The Scream 4 original motion picture soundtrack was released on April 12, 2011, by Lakeshore Records. A score soundtrack was also released, on April 19, 2011, by Varese Sarabande. Release. The film was released in North America on April 15, 2011. Home media. Scream 4 was first released on DVD and Blu-ray in Mexico on August 5, 2011. It was later released in the United Kingdom and Ireland on August 22, 2011, in Canada and the United States on October 4, 2011, and in Australia and New Zealand on October 13, 2011. The film made roughly $4,103,282 in DVD sales in the United States, bringing the film's lifetime gross to approximately $101,334,702. In the US DVD and Blu-ray rental charts, Scream 4 entered at number 2 on its week of release. The film then spent 7 consecutive weeks among the top 20 of the chart. Scream 4 made its television debut on April 20, 2012, on cable channel Showtime. In December 2012, Showtime featured Scream 4 during a free weekend preview, where the station was available in over 80 million homes in America. On April 19, 2013, Scream 4 was added to Netflix's online streaming service. To promote the DVD and Blu-ray release, Universal Studios produced Terror Tram, SCRE4M for Your Life as an event featured in its annual Halloween Horror Nights throughout September and October 2011. Reception. Box office. Scream 4 grossed $38.2 million in the United States and Canada, and $59.1 million in other territories, for a total gross of $97.1 million, against its budget of $40 million. The film was released in 3,305 theaters on 4,400 screens and grossed over $1 million in its midnight previews. It made $8.7 million on Friday and $19.3 million in its opening weekend, finishing second at the box office. According to industry experts, the film's opening weekend was disappointing, experiencing the third lowest opening of the Scream franchise. In its second weekend, it fell to fifth place, taking in $7 million, then $2.2 million in its third weekend. In its first weekend worldwide, the film took $37.3 million from 30 territories, behind only Rio, which took $53.9 million from 62 territories. The film topped the box office in the United Kingdom, taking over £2 million, came in second in France, third in Mexico and fourth in Australia. Critical response. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 60% based on 190 reviews, with an average score of 5.90/10. The website's critical consensus reads, "The franchise is showing its age, but Scream 4 is undeniably an improvement over its predecessor, with just enough meta-humor and clever kills." On Metacritic, the film received a score of 52 based on 32 reviews, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A and to F scale. Roger Ebert gave the film 2 out of 4 stars, criticizing the film for using the cliched formula of the slasher genre, but complimenting Craven's direction and Williamson's dialogue. Empire gave the film 2 out of 5 stars, criticizing the film's old-fashioned formula and lack of scare factor. The New York Daily News thought the film was dated and that relying on obvious clichés doesn't seem ironic anymore, just easy. The Toronto Sun gave the film a mixed review, writing that this installment is nowhere near the hip, serrated edge blast of newness the original was in 1996. Suddenly, it's the horror thriller that, like, your parents are excited about. However, the review praised director Wes Craven. Colin Covert of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune gave the film a perfect score of 4 out of 4 stars, praising the combination of scares, comedy, and twists. The Boston Herald wrote that the film is often amusing but too long. Lisa Kennedy from the Denver Post stated that Scream 4 pays plenty of homage to their 1996 original, but that it is not close to its greatness, despite calling it a cut above most slasher flicks. Lisa Schwartzbaum of Entertainment Weekly praised the film, stating it's a giddy reminder of everything that made Scream such a fresh Scream in the first place, while Betsy Sharkey of the Los Angeles Times wrote that Scream 4 finds a way to live up to its gory past while it carves out new terrors in new ways. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone gave the movie 2 out of 4 stars, criticizing the comedic overtones. In the years since its release, many have credited Scream 4 with foreshadowing the effects of social media on today's youth and the extreme lengths they go to achieve internet fame. Accolades. In June 2011, Scream 4 was nominated for a Teen Choice Award for Best Horror Movie but lost to Paranormal Activity 2. On March 2, 2012, Scream 4 won the award for Best Horror Movie, and Ghostface came in third place for Best Villain at the Virgin Media Movie Awards.